In 1958, two pilots in America took off from an airport in Las Vegas in a Cessna 172 and continued flying without actually touching down again for another 64 days. Now to this day, it still holds the world record for the longest crewed flight ever performed in terms of endurance. And there's a lot more to that story which I'm going to go into in this video, including how they actually managed to keep the aircraft flying for 64 days when they weren't doing any air-to-air refueling. And so today, just like those aviation pioneers, Jack and I, well, we're going to be undergoing our own aviation endurance challenge, traveling on a world record breaking flight as well, albeit probably in a little bit more comfort than those guys back in the 1950s in that Cessna 172. That's why we're in Singapore. I know a lot of you out there like your Formula One as well. Anyone else think that Alex Albon is a future World Drivers' Championship champion? I do.
Suitable for vegans.
Yum. So this flight that we're on today, this is not actually the longest commercially operating flight in the world at the moment. This flight is going to be 15,344 kilometers between Singapore and our destination airport, which today it is New York, but it's Newark Airport in New York City. The Singapore to JFK flight, which is the world's longest flight, is 15,349 kilometers. So we're missing out on being on the world's longest flight by 5 kilometers. As a percentage of 15,349, that is small. The next on the list is Auckland to Doha, operated by Qatar Airways, and to put it into context, that's 1,000 kilometers shorter than Singapore to New York. Perth to London on Qantas is 14,499, and then Qantas's Dallas to Melbourne is 14,472 kilometers. Those are the 5 longest currently in operation. So transport yourself to Las Vegas for a second, which this clearly is not. I'm already here in New York as I'm recording this now. There were 2 pilots, one called Robert Tim and the other guy called John Cook. Now they took a Cessna 172, which had only been released 2 years earlier. It came out in '56. So they took a 2-year-old aircraft and basically had the idea to try and beat the endurance record for the longest time airborne in a crewed flight. The aircraft was named Hacienda, and that was actually named after a casino at the time, for which this whole thing was a publicity stunt to try and promote. They added a 95-gallon fuel tank into the aircraft to supplement the already 47 gallons of fuel that they had on board for the aircraft. And they also modified the engine. This bit's clever. I've always wondered about this for long distance flights. They modified the engine so that oil could be put into the engine from within the cockpit. They could basically do oil changes whilst in flight. Now the original world record had been set just previously to 1958, and I think it was only just over 50 days. So Robert and John, these 2 pilots, had this crazy idea to beat it. They didn't just beat it, they smashed it. They actually were airborne for 64 days, 22 hours and 19 minutes. But it was how they managed to refuel the aircraft during flight without actually touching down and without doing any air-to-air refueling. That was the interesting part. Hello, Elmo. Now, longer flights have been done on commercial aircraft, of course. If you take, for example, one of my favourites, which is the Boeing 747 that flew from London to Sydney. It's Victor Hotel Oscar Juliet Alpha, City of Canberra. It was a promotional flight done in 1998 when the 747 was going to be retired. That one actually flew non-stop 17,000 kilometres over a 20-hour period. But of course, there was no one on board apart from the flight crew. It would have been fully fueled. But I think it's a cool world record, and I have a bit of a soft spot in my heart for not only every 747, but that one in particular, because it is based down at Shell Harbour Airport in Wollongong. Now, the refueling process of this world record breaking flight is probably the most innovative and I think one of the most fascinating parts, because they didn't do air-to-air refueling. They actually dangled a tube or a hose basically outside the aircraft down to a truck on the ground, which would follow them at the same pace. They're probably fly only about 10 feet above the ground, maintaining pace with a truck, which would then connect that hose to a fuel tank and pump fuel up into the aircraft. It took about 3 minutes to refuel the aircraft, and during the 64 days they had to do that process 128 times, and occasionally, because timings must have been off or for whatever reason, occasionally they had to do that at night time. As well as fuel being pumped up, they also then gave supplies. So there were bags that were connected to a rope which were pulled into the aircraft for food and water, and then there were bags of waste products that were then also put down to the truck. So if you're wondering about the whole, how did they go to the toilet during that time? Well, in the aircraft, and then the truck took care of the rest. The Cessna 172 apparently still exists, and you can see it at it's the Harry Reid International Terminal at Las Vegas Airport. It's hanging above the public area as you're walking through the airport. I may have walked past it in the past and looked up and thought, oh, there's an aircraft hanging from the ceiling. Never actually realised what an important part of aviation history that little Cessna 172 actually is. Also, how cool is New York?
Welcome to New York, ladies and gentlemen. Please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened until the seatbelt sign is off. Thank you for flying Singapore Airlines, a member of Star Alliance.
At the end of the day, I don't think it matters if you think that the world's longest flight should be judged by how long a human being has spent in a plane, how long that plane has been above the planet, or just how far the plane's actually travelled. It really comes down to the fact that what we can do with aviation back in the 50s all the way through to where we are right now is just amazing, and I love it. Every day I love it. And now it's brought me to New York City, so I love it even more.